All right, we are back with flash loans. And that's the first story here. Beanstalk is a cryptocurrency project that let you trade one cryptocurrency for another. And it was set up like a DAO. So you could propose any change in the code, right? And you would just have to get a majority of the stakeholders to approve it. So somebody came up with a high level 51% attack called the flash loan. They borrowed $1 billion of some other cryptocurrency very briefly for 13 seconds, used that to buy so many tokens that they were now the majority stakeholder, and approved sending a bunch of money to themselves. And since it just goes by $1, one vote, they won, and then they just turned it all off and left, and all that money's been running through the Avalanche Tumblr to anonymize it. And the Beanstalk admins are on Twitter saying, if you give like 90% of it back, we'll call the other 10% like a bug bounty, and please. And they're like, no clue from the other side. Looks like they're just stealing all the money. So that's a cool 182 million in what amounts to like a 51% attack. And this is kind of what people are worried about with the coming of Ethereum 2. They're going to move from proof of work to proof of stake. And this is what the proof of stake opponents say. That, the good thing about Bitcoin is that you just simply cannot afford enough computing power to outvote everybody else. And with proof of stake, in principle, you could. So you're going back essentially closer to the centralized model of a bank where you trust one bank and they could steal your money if they wanted to. So anyway, cryptocurrency continues to be exciting. And another one I wanted to point out here is biofuels. Joe Biden won. By the way, James Carville says Democrats should stop criticizing Joe Biden, but that's what I plan to do anyway. I am not going to stop. So Joe Biden, the thing about Joe Biden is you'll go from Donald Trump, who is a raving lunatic, back to an ordinary average politician running government the usual way. And that's what we got. And the usual government involves a whole lot of lying and stabbing you in the back. And so Joe Biden just lies about things the same old fashioned way. Like he says, well, I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you dump some oil from the strategic oil reserve, enough to take 10 cents a gallon off the price there. That'll make you happy, won't it? And of course it won't. And then he says, well, you can put more alcohol in the fuel, which is complete garbage. This has never made any sense. It has been proven to make the climate crisis worse. The whole point of it is pandering to the Iowa corn lobby. And it's right now it's worse than ever because with Ukraine not producing wheat, there's a huge food shortage. And we're going to take like 30% of the food in America and turn it into fuel, which will be inferior and more damaging than the oil we could use.
And corn is at an corn is at an all-time high right now in terms of price.
Yes, that's what will happen. The corn will go up, which is going to get him more votes in the Iowa caucus. And that's all he cares about. He's just throwing away long-term good and short-term good for political gain. And that's the old political game. So we're getting what we wanted out of Biden. We're getting politics as usual. This is how he ended up with Trump, because there was, in fact, like a reason why you could kind of hate politics as usual. Anyway, Kaitlyn has got some good news for once about wrecking the satellites.
Yeah, so after decades and decades of the US just going up and blowing stuff at random in space, now that other countries want to do it, the United States says, might not be a really good idea. And we're going to stop doing it from now on. So Kamala Harris made a statement saying, hey, we're going to be responsible now in space, and we're going to stop just blowing stuff up at random. And by blowing stuff up at random, I mean literally just sending up missiles, hitting old satellites, and completely just destroying them. In fact, the United States, even once, like in the 1960s, or actually a few times, blew up nuclear missiles in space. Like, we were so reckless. And now that we got all our information, we got all our technology from that, we're saying, we should we should really be responsible in space. Like, okay, now to be fair, I think being responsible in space and not just blowing stuff up at random is a good idea, right? You don't want to send a lot of debris that could hit other stuff and take out our infrastructure. And we do have more stuff than ever, making that debris more dangerous than ever. So there is a case to be made that, that a lot of the blowing up we did in the past was out of naivety, right? We were naive. We didn't really know what we were doing. We just thought, oh, it's cool to blow stuff up, which is a fair point.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can argue with that.
Right. But there's some numbers here that are important. So the test that the United States has done in this article by Ars Technica. Oh, did I mention this is an article by Ars Technica. It's written by Eric Berger. So these tests have produced over 6,300 pieces of debris that are still in orbit. And these debris are like little bullets. They can hit your satellite, they can hit your space station, rip it to shreds, rip holes in it, destroy your equipment, destroy your important spy satellites, multi-million-dollar telescopes, all the stuff we put in orbit. It poses a significant threat. And the United States wants to stop doing it, and they want to encourage other countries to stop doing it as well. But, we're not really in a position to be like, blowing stuff up in space is, you should never do that, because obviously we did for a long time.
Well, it's sort of nice. It's interesting we're taking this position where we are going to just unilaterally quit doing it and say, hopefully shame others into taking the same position, because Russia tried that with nuclear weapons for decades. They would unilaterally promise to stop making this nuke and see if the US would follow, and we wouldn't. Of course, we knew they were just lying, which might have lowered our propensity to follow.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to blow stuff up in space, just do it far away from Earth, out of Earth orbit. Do it in in a sun orbit.
Well, nobody.
Heliocentric orbit is, as they say in the actual business. But,
well, if you're going to be like that. Well, anyway, I got a scam that I thought was really quite clever. What they do is first they get some convincing information about you, like the last four of your social or something. Then they send you an email saying, we have a $5,000 transaction on your account going through some third-party service like Venmo. And if you would, do you approve this? Yes, no. And if you click no, then they contact you with a text and say, this is like the fraud division in league with the FBI. And what they say is somebody has somehow made an unauthorized transaction on your account. So we think we fixed it, but we want to test it. So first, go into your account and disconnect it from your email address. And then go into Venmo and send a payment to your email address, and let's see if it still goes through. And they've, in the meantime, made another account with your email address. So you're sending the money to somebody else, but you think you're sending it to yourself. Anyway, it's a pretty good scam, and it's working. So people should be on the lookout for that one. And all right, let's go back to Kaitlyn that's got clean energy. Lots of good news coming from you today.
Yeah, no, more clean energy. So we're cleaning up space, and we're also cleaning up Earth's atmosphere using clean energy. So Bloomberg Quint.
Which seems to be repeating Bloomberg, but somehow part of Bloomberg. So I don't know. Anyway.
It's Quint. BloombergQuint.com has an article written by Mark Chediak talking about how California was pretty much running entirely on renewables for a little bit this month. So it actually was on about 97% renewable energy at about 3:40 p.m. on April 3rd.
I think Texas was too, actually, scoring pretty high in renewables.
Yeah. Like I said in an earlier podcast, you would think that the Earth is precious enough that we would want to spend the extra resources and the extra effort to make sure that we can keep it running for our children and our children's children. Keep the
atmosphere. If you were a hippie, you might think that.
Right. However, that is not enough. That is not enough. The only thing that works is economic incentives. And it turns out that solar and wind and all that stuff is so cheap.
Yeah.
In fact, the reason why it's cheap, if you really think about it, is that all our energy is solar energy.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about fossil fuels, whether you're talking about even wind energy, which is just the sun heating up parts of the atmosphere unevenly, moving wind around, everything is solar powered. But when you actually just set up solar power, you're just cutting out the middleman.
This is why the ancients regarded the sun as God. I mean, all of us are alive because of the power of the sun.
We are the power of the sun, and to a smaller extent, the power of the earth. We do need our magnetic field and everything, but so it's just super cheap to do solar and renewables, and we're moving away. And for the first time, we were 97% renewable on April 3rd. But apparently this is a spring thing. So solar in particular is very easy to harvest in the spring, just due to the, well, at least in the northern hemisphere, due to the position of the sun. And
Yeah.
yeah.
But still, I'm glad to see it. And I think that's the only long-term fix. I think telling people what they ought to do is not very effective, but telling them what the cheaper thing to do is much more likely to actually happen.
Yeah, I remember I only took one economics course in college, and that was environmental economics. And that was basically the entire focus of the course was, okay, yeah, you want to clean up the earth. The only way to do it is to create either real or artificially created economic incentives. And that'll get companies to do, clean up the environment. But if you just say, hey, let's not kill our children, it's kind of like, well, that's an interesting suggestion you have there.
Well, the point is everybody is desperate in the short run.
Yep.
And all they're trying to do is get through the next quarter. And the fact that it's going to destroy the world 10 years from now is just not important right now.
Right.
Anyway, so then Star is another network of some sort that sells the Rarible NFT marketplace. It's just Star is the name of the person that lost it, just the characterization of some. So somebody had Jay Chow, some singer, had a $500,000 NFT, and somebody stole it with kind of a cute attack. NFTs run on cryptocurrency blockchains, and they have API calls. There's a standard set of API calls. They all pretty much call them from Bitcoin, and the NFT one has got a API call called like allow all or something. Yeah, set approval for all. This is the equivalent of, full control everyone in Windows. So you can send somebody a transaction. It looks like you're just buying an NFT, but if they don't examine it, they're executing that call. And the call is give them approval for all, making the other person administrator over your whole portfolio. So they just sent somebody this actual link. He clicked on the link and blam, they stole his NFTs. So it's another high level attack. Now they patched that one, but there are so many of these. I mean, the underlying blockchains for things like Bitcoin and Ethereum are really quite stable and secure, but the stuff added on top, like NFT and cross-chain, is just sort of thrown on top without much caution and full of these vulnerabilities. So that's one there. And the last one I thought was very interesting. If you go to the New Yorker, Ronan Farrow has a long article that is very good, exposing the NSO group, which we've been hearing a lot about for the last couple of years, and explaining in much more detail than I've ever seen before what they do. The NSO group is an Israeli spyware company, and what they are is ex-Israeli military. Israel has mandatory military service. Everybody has to serve, and a bunch of them serve in their cyber range, and they're famous for being very, very deadly with their cyber attacks. And they leave, and then they formed a private company to just basically resell the same technology or derivative technology. And in fact, the Israeli military, they have a quote where he says, people will come to us and say, we want you to give us your military stuff. And we'll say, well, that's classified and we can't. So but the next best thing is the NSO group. They'll sell you stuff that's almost as good. And they say they sell it to all kinds of repressive regimes that use it to spy on activists and kill people and stuff. And one lesson, students ask me, can somebody see what I'm doing on my phone? And I say, well, if anybody wants to buy this stuff, they can absolutely take over your phone and see everything. Don't imagine they can't. They have zero-click attacks that will just totally infect your phone, and they're doing it to people if they're important enough that a military or somebody rich wants to get in. And they sell it to everybody despite their claims that they only sell it to good people, because they get approval of the Israeli government, and the Israeli government does not consider ethics or anything, human rights or anything like that. They consider Israeli politics like close partnership with Russia. They're on the Russia's side in the Russia-Ukraine war for that reason. They've got Israeli government just doesn't really care about human rights much at all. They have other concerns. And so the US has put them on the entity list. So it's now forbidden for US businesses to do business with NSO anymore. And that will probably kill the company. But as they say, as they're going down, they say, this is not going to fix anything because we're just an arms supplier and there's a bunch of competitors selling the same stuff. So just like every arms supplier, they say, you can stamp us out, but there'll just be 10 more to grow after us. There's a huge demand for this stuff. And of course, how wonderful would it be to just be able to infect somebody's phone and see what they're doing if you're in a military operation or catching criminals or something? There's clearly a huge demand for this stuff, just like there's a huge demand for guns. And all the efforts to only let the good people have it, not the bad people, work about as well as that works with guns and missiles and stuff. Anyway, And the last one is Kaitlyn, who has got somebody attack Puerto Rico. Now, why the hell would somebody attack Puerto Rico?
Money, all the money in Puerto Rico,
Is there,
apparently.
how much money is there in Puerto Rico?
Millions, according to this article. So the Associated Press has an article talking about a cyber attack that completely disabled their poll collection system. So, I mean, that's, you know, that might be kind of interesting for a few people, for a few Puerto Ricans. Unfortunately, the government, of course, is not getting the revenue, which in the long term could be a problem. So there is a system in Puerto Rico called Auto Expresso, and it's a private company, and they handle all the tolls and everything for the roads. And they were just hit by a major cyber attack. And unfortunately, the article is a little sparse on details about what was hit, but apparently the goal was to extract money. And so in the meantime, the entire collection system, the toll collection system in Puerto Rico is down. No more tolls.
Yeah. Sounds like it might just be a ransomware attack.
It's probably just ransomware. In fact, there was in 2020, there was a major ransomware attack over in Puerto Rico that I think they tried to steal like $4 million from like just government agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, if you think the United States has problems with ransomware, you know, there are other places that have much less money to throw into cybersecurity than we do. And unfortunately, they get hit hard. So
Yep. I've seen, if you do traveling, you see appalling out-of-date stuff everywhere.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's it for this one. And we'll be back Friday. I have to find the button.